get this session underway. It's one of my infatuations with water. It's a fascinating subject, and I'm currently writing something about water, but I'm not as expert as all these people sitting in front of you. But I wanted to sort of start by telling this story about an Indian official in Chhattisgarh was taking a selfie, and he's a food inspector for the central state, and he dropped his phone in the reservoir, and he then said he had permission to pump out 2 million liters of water to find his phone. This is a true story. He obviously didn't take note of the UN warning that half the world's population could be facing water stress by 2030. Access to clean drinking water is one of the defining challenges of the century. But the reason I told the story about the Indian official was because it perhaps showed how people are taking water for granted. 2 million liters of water just chucked away, drained away. So let's find some solutions that can help countries ensure access to water for all. And some basic facts for those of you who don't know: 70% of planet Earth is covered by water, 70%. But nearly 97% of that water is salty and therefore undrinkable. Another 2% of the Earth's water is frozen in ice caps and glaciers, so that leaves only 1% of the planet's drinking water available for billions of people around the world. And water scarcity is an issue here in Kazakhstan. 90% of Kazakhstan's water arrives in one big spurt with the spring runoff. And there have been some controls on water, certainly here in Astana. But the real global story is there's too much water in one place and not enough in another, to simplify it. Up to 3.5 billion people live under conditions of water stress at least 1 month of the year. But let's cut straight to the chase, the business view. Michael Burry, he's the man who told the story about Lehman Brothers. The Big Short is based on his story. Michael is the man who predicted the collapse of the American financial market. And now he's focusing all his attention, all his trading, on one commodity: water. Fresh water, he says, cannot be taken for granted anymore. Water is political. So let's find out how to make water more secure. With me to think creatively is Randall Bruins, former professor. He served for 36 years as an environmental scientist in the US Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Research and Development. His research has focused on the role of ecosystems on promoting human well-being. He's also studied in China, in Hubei, wetland agriculture, which is going to come up, I'm sure. Kevin Mois is General Director of Valmont Industries for CIS in China. He's worked internationally, starting first with manufacturing operations in Saudi Arabia, then moving to China in 2015 and joining Valmont in 2019. And he recently relocated here to Kazakhstan. Hank E. Neubauer, owner and director of Adelta, director of the Netherlands Water Partnership, head of Netherlands-Kazakhstan Business Association. So lots of links here. Estelle Payen, after her master's degree in biochemistry, she has a biotechnology option. She has a specialized master in management of agri-food industries, and she's held management positions. And she specializes at the moment, or has just come back from Morocco, where she's specializing in oases. And we all know what an oasis is. Mathilde Mesnard is Deputy Director for the Environment Directorate and OECD Coordinator for Climate and Green Finance. From 21 to 22, she was the OECD Deputy Finance for the G7 and G20, and Acting Director for Financial and Enterprise Affairs. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are your panelists, and I'm going to open with Henk. And it's clear, I think, Henk, that the world is beginning and I accent on the beginning, to take water or issues of water scarcity seriously. And I think that was highlighted at the recent UN Water Conference. It only took them 80 years to come up with a water conference. And there was a warning that if we don't take bold and coordinated international action, this issue will worsen. What, in your opinion, then, is the main cause for water scarcity?
Forgot to switch myself on, excuse me. Well, thank you for an excellent introduction. Thank you to the organizers of this forum for an opportunity to speak to you. Well, the main reason for water scarcity internationally is overexploitation of limited and even finite resources and bad water management practices. Shifting weather patterns due to climate change are aggravating the situation for some, but also present new opportunities for others. So the effects of climate change are not evenly distributed over the world in this case. And it's important to realize that water scarcity is not only an issue in areas traditionally defined as drylands. In many countries with abundant rainfall and transnational supply by rivers, such as my own country, water scarcity is also rapidly becoming a pressing issue. Other important drivers next to overexploitation are excessive pollution and nutrient loading from agriculture, dysfunctional ecosystems, institutional issues such as lack of coordination between sectors or countries, and also transsectoral coordination between, for instance, public and private sector, and low efficiency in water use. And the total water demand globally is expected to grow with 25% in the business as usual scenario until 2070. But 80% of that water use will be in agriculture. This may sound a bit hopeless, but a lot can be done still to alleviate this situation. Significant savings in water use are possible through improved management practices, through technical solutions, and also through improved spatial planning. It should be done by taking river basins as the defining landscapes. But we must realize that even if we are able to turn high ambitions into results, some regions in the world will continue to experience water scarcities in the coming decades. So I will leave it here, Stephen.
Lovely. All right, thank you, Henk. It's a good opener. To Matilda, I think we'll go next. Matilda, what are, you think, the key considerations to tackle water scarcity issues in the light of the rising impact of the negative side of climate change here in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia more broadly?
Thank you. You asked me to tell a story, so my story will be on enhancing cross-sectoral and transboundary cooperation. You mentioned that in your intervention, because it has been become very clear that water cuts across all the economic activities and the ecological needs, and this has implications for energy, for food, for environmental security, and these relationships are becoming more and more clear, but this is making our life more difficult and more complex if you want to manage well the water. That means that decisions taken in each of these sectors, energy, food, agriculture, environmental security, etc., have impacts on the others, on one another, and each time you need to give careful consideration to multiple and sometimes conflicting objectives. And in Central Asia, in this region, you have fierce competition on water across cities, agriculture, and energy. These tensions are particularly pronounced. And then, if you consider climate change, on the top of that, of course, climate change already by itself poses a critical threat to people's livelihood in this region, and also to economic growth. But it really, what it does, it exacerbates these tensions that I was talking about, because it intensifies demand for water on one side, and it creates more uncertainty on the other side on the short and the long-term availability of water. And we know also that, you know, the speed of temperature change in Central Asia is expected to be more than twice the global average. That means that you have already fierce competition, in addition climate change that will accelerate and that will exacerbate these tensions between, you know, water for cities, water for agriculture, water for energy. And in this region also you have again a worsening factor. It's the land degradation issue and the growing demand for energy, for water and for food that is coming from population growth first, and also from the desire for economic diversification and development. And if you look at food and energy, of course it can be traded within region and across region. Water is much more complicated. And just give me a very obvious example. Let me give you an obvious example. If you have a decision on to invest in a hydropower generation in countries upstream a river, of course you have very important consequences to population growth and to the communities down the river. So basically my message is that cooperation, dialogue, and striving for policy coherence, which is always a big challenge, you know, will be key to meet the resource requirements of the region in the future. And in the last 30 years, Central Asian countries, they have done a lot to achieve that. They have, you know, introduced many regional institutions and legal instruments to try to face this challenge of transboundary cooperation on water and on energy, and this is quite commendable. But in the current context, with the climate change, with the new, you know, geopolitical complexity, let's put it this way, with the new socio-economic context also, accelerating and enhancing this cooperation, both cross-sectoral, transboundary, is more urgent than ever. So that will be my first intervention.
Lovely. Thank you, Matilda. Let's go to Kevin. What's the thinking in Kazakhstan? Has Kazakhstan started to take seriously water sharing for commercial, agriculture, commercial AG, industry and general population needs?
Thank you, Stephen, for the question. I'm very honored to be here in front of this distinguished panel, yourself. And it's been a very good conference so far. I started in Almaty at the beginning of the week, came with the American delegation, and I can see that there's a lot of trade involved. There's a lot of people worrying about the same subject, whether it's water scarcity or impact of supply chain. It's all been affecting Kazakhstan greatly. I'm here representing Valmont, and we're addressing some of the planet's biggest concerns. Where do we start with water? It's been around for a long time. It's been around since the beginning of civilization. Many civilizations have followed the water around the planet. We today are looking for clean water. Our population has gotten big. We have lots of food demand, and we're looking for these water resources and trying to figure out how to use them. Kazakhstan has a small population, a very big country, and they have a tremendous amount of water, and they're trying to figure out how to use it. We would like to figure out how to put this cooperation together, make it work for the populations. As some of the guests have already explained, we are many different things going on with delivery systems and that type of thing. Now to your question, we need to look at and identify how the population is using this water. We have agriculture, we have industry, and we have the general population sharing this. And I would like to say that this is going to be something that we're going to have to negotiate with something that we're going to have to look into the future and be able to work out among everybody in the country and in the region.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, there is enough water on the planet. It's a question of whether it's allocated correctly. Let's go to Randall. And innovation. I mean, most of the answers are found in technology. What, Randall, is the pathway for scaling up those small-scale innovations to achieve national or regional scale impacts on water scarcity?
Thank you, Stephen. I am going to speak about a pathway for innovation, and you can bring the slides back, and I'll go through them quickly. So I'm going to be looking at water scarcity through the lens of youth innovation and entrepreneurship. Let's get this pointed in the right direction. Okay, and you've already stated the problem. SDG 6 summary progress update did the same. And that progress update posed the question of how do we accelerate action toward meeting Goal 6. And one of the important answers that it gave was innovation. And as Stephen mentioned, innovative practices being scaled up. So in a world that is so short on skills right now, where are we going to get the innovation, the innovative energies that are needed to solve a problem like water scarcity? Maybe we'll never know. I'm pushing this button, and maybe I've turned this on.
Why don't you just tell us, Randall?
Yeah. Okay, okay. So, the answer, Enactus is the world's largest experiential education network, training the next generation of leaders to achieve the global goals. And put another way, Enactus mahandak maksatarhaushin next gen kusbashalaran dayan Yemdiga ying ira yermetik bilim jelisa. Oh, yes, it's in front of me. Okay. So Enactus is an international nonprofit of students, academics, and business leaders who use entrepreneurship and innovation to improve the environment and people's lives. It is a global network, and at each of these locations there is a national office that operates independently and very actively here in Kazakhstan. And so how do we work? We register teams in universities, colleges, and increasingly at the high school level. We provide education and training on innovation and entrepreneurship. And then these teams do their research, develop their project ideas. They exercise their own entrepreneurial leadership, and then they present their results in youthfully charged, over-the-top competitions that are lots of fun. And the National Expo was held here in this building 1 month ago. Enactus is all about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Every Enactus project reports on its project toward the global goals. And so Enactus has made tremendous progress over a quarter century of influence in Kazakhstan, with many jobs created, many participants and partners. There are two main ways that we do this. I mentioned our entrepreneurship competitions, and there are also global races around particular themes to stimulate innovation using cash prizes and competition. And so now, in Kazakhstan, I will highlight just a very few of the kinds of projects that relate to today's topic of water scarcity. For example, water filter production, the use of an agricultural waste, rice hulls as a filter medium, and then these filters were being sold by low-income families, so that became their business. And this enterprise has continued now separately from the student project.
Great. Just speed ahead, Randall.
Okay, I will do so. So I'll just go on to our challenges. We must transform more of our student projects into sustained enterprises. We must scale up these projects to create broad-scale benefits, and we must increase business mentorship and sponsorship.
Right.
We have many sponsors, and we're thankful for them.
Great.
And hope that you will be in touch so we can let you know how you can be involved.
Well, that's the academic side, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, give them a round of applause. It's a very good. How does Enactus, given the academic, how does it interact with government? And is there anything for other organizations to learn from this or not?
Enactus has great involvement from the Kazakhstan national government and governments at all levels, universities, quasi-governmental organizations like Atamekin, the Chamber of Commerce that we have seen so much of in this event.
No, that's good news. Thank you. Let's go to Estelle. In order to reduce carbon emissions and other greenhouse gases, isn't your microphone working? Oh, you're right. Oh, you've got some slides as well, have you? Very few, please, because I want to hear from you rather than to slides. The carbon footprint is accessible to everyone. Can we do the same for water footprints? These same services to encourage awareness of water resources and, of course, measure the impact of our lifestyles and consumption?
Push. Oh. Do you have?
Okay.
There you are.
So, sorry, because I was looking for...
Carry on.
Okay, so do you want me to ask?
Yes, answer the question about the carbon footprint. Everybody knows where the carbon footprint is. What about water footprints?
Yes, I don't know if you have ever heard about the water footprint. Probably you know about carbon footprint, and you're probably sensibilized to CO2 emission or other greenhouse gas emission. But what about water footprint? If I ask you the question, can somebody answer? Do you know that in France, for instance, because I'm French, in France, for instance, French citizens, the water footprint for one person is 1,150 liters every day. Yes. Oh, yes. So you realize that because of our way of living, because of our overconsumption, we use water too much. Why 4,150 liters? You have 150 liters for domestic uses. You have 2.5 liters for your beverage, for drinking water. And you have 3,000 liters for purchases, for food purchases. For instance, when you buy 1 kilogram of beef, it is equivalent to 15,000 liters of water. When you buy 1 kilogram of apples, the equivalent is 700 liters. So what about the water footprint? So when we are talking about water scarcity, we have to consider not only the visible water, but also the invisible water. And it means that you have to consider your way of life and your consumption. Do I need to buy or rebuy everything every day? You have to think about it. So just to introduce myself, I am Michel Peillard, I am from France, and last week I was in Morocco, in Sahara, for an international congress about oases, and it was about water also. And I'm glad to be here because I am the founder and the president of a project which is called Excess Climate Can't Wait. And I am the president of a French non-profit organization. And we want to promote cooperation, intergenerational, intercultural, inter-ethnical, international cooperation, because we want to cope with climate change. So we want to share ideas, and we want to share that the fact that traditional knowledge combined with innovation is important. You have to be open-minded. Let's stop being narrow-minded and stop thinking that only innovation is the key for finding solutions. Traditional knowledge, ancestral knowledge from native people from deserts are important also, because these people are used from centuries to live with heat and with drought. Why not listening was the same? So we want to share. So I will be brief because we have talked about it already. So these are contextual items. This is important. Don't forget that when we are talking about climate issues, water scarcity, above all, climate crisis is a human crisis. Water crisis is child rights crisis. Don't forget that. The future is in their hands, but the future is in our hands also. And when we are talking about future, we have to plan our future. Of course, there is a cost. Intervention, proactive interventions have a cost. Right. Regeneration of soils, of forests, there is a cost, but it's worth it.
So how is this all helping find a solution to water scarcity, just briefly?
Yes. So just before, for finding solutions, you have to think about your place into nature. Are you into nature? Are you a part of a whole? Or are you a part? So it depends of your consideration of nature. Yeah. The solution depends on it. And yes, we are. So we want to share this kind of solution that exists from centuries underground, under the Sahara, under the desert. Probably you have heard about it. Retara. You have the same in Algeria, you have the same in Iran. So this traditional system of irrigation is sorry, I just have
don't worry, just dash on.
Is respectful, yeah. And it needs no energy, and it provides water to oases and to people and to village.
Excellent. Just spool ahead because we're pretty short of time.
Okay, so if we can have some, just so that you can see what it is with that
Estelle,
audio.
what's the point you're making? That's what I want to get at.
The point is that if you are talking about water, you have to think about how you manage water, the governance of water. Yeah, and some civilizations, some communities have a system of governance of water. They share water. There are a system, an efficient system, and you have to think about governance and about management, not only about equipment, how you want to share water.
Right.
So
Okay,
yes.
let's stop you there, because that's a very good point.
Sorry?
Because you're right, governments have to share ideas, there has to be cooperation, but it's quite a hard task for a lot of governments to share water. But I want to go to Henk, and we know that Central Asia, and we'll come back to Estelle, I haven't sort of,
Yes.
by all means, but you're right about the sharing water, that's a big issue between countries. We know that Central Asia, Henk, is one of the planet's hardest hit regions by climate change. Kazakhstan has already identified a decade ago that water availability may become a limiting factor for economic development. What can a country like Kazakhstan do to alleviate the present and future problems with water availability and, of course, with those seasonal floods that I alluded to at the beginning?
Forums like these help, because we've just heard from these great people here several important aspects. So please continue to stimulate this cooperation between sectors, people and countries, and let's learn from each other. But for Kazakhstan it's very important to realize that most of its water comes from neighboring countries. It's therefore encouraging that Kazakhstan has already some quite robust transboundary water management treaties in place, although not for every river basin. You also refer to it, Matilda. And the Kazakh government also has some quite some relevant policies already in place. Since already a decade, the Kazakh government has a strategy to arrive at a green economy. And in this strategy, water management is quite well incorporated. The main directions of this green economy are sustainable water resources management to match the demand for fresh water with freshwater availability and to reduce the water-related risks is one of the main objectives of the strategy for the green economy. Forestry. Forestry sector should transition from wood production to ecosystem service for tourism, water conservation, ecosystem and climate resilience. That's a very important aspect of the strategy for the green economy, which will help combat water scarcity. Green agriculture. Current practices should gradually reorient towards less water-intensive crops, reduction of agrochemical load, integrated pest and disease control, and anti-erosion technologies. Already a decade ago, Kazakhstan formulated this as an important policy spearhead. And the fourth main direction is the implementation of renewable energy sources. But to make these policies work, more is needed, of course, than just write up a strategy. On the institutional level, it should be considered to improve integrated water resource management and to develop common tools. There is a need for an improved data-driven policy and management formulation, for climate proofing of budgeting. We are no longer in a stationary world. And there is also a need for strategic cooperation on climate and water policy making with other countries. And Kazakhstan already implemented, not so long ago, an interdepartmental and intersectoral platform for water policy and climate adaptation decision making, which is also a great step. Also, the cooperation of the private sector should be ensured. The private sector is, we can no longer rely on a purely market-driven approach. That will not automatically ensure sustainability. So markets should be regulated to give the right incentives to business. Well, there are also technical things that could be done. Improve data collection, sharing and analyzing geospatial data, the use of hydrodynamic models to support policy making and let institutions work on the basis of these data. Well, with regard to direct action to combat water scarcity, most effect can be achieved in the agricultural sector as it is responsible for most of the water demand. Improved local water management and irrigation practices, but also the choice and the optimization of farm crops based on available water resources can account for a large saving of water consumption. And cities and industries should, of course, clean up their wastewater and adopt principles of a circular economy with regard to their water systems. Ecosystems and landscapes should be conserved and/or rehabilitated, for instance, through reforestation or the use of nature-based solutions for societal issues.
Lovely. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Hank. Matilda, let's stay in Central Asia. What are some of the creative examples you see here that can contribute to addressing water scarcity issues?
So, if you allow me, I will go back to my previous message that was like this need for cross-sectoral and cross-boundary cooperation. And within this context, we have discussed with a lot of water experts from the region, and they have indicated to us that there are 4 main recommendations that are directed at the governance of water. So it's really responding to some points that were made by colleagues in this panel, and that what we need is 4 things. First, longer-term multi-year coordination of water resource management across the region, so at the regional level. Second, joint investment planning for water and energy infrastructure between Central Asian countries. Third, enhanced interaction and synergies between water sector institutions and those of the energy sector. And last but not least, greater use of market-based instruments such as insurance and blended finance mechanisms. And based on these recommendations, we are currently launching a project that is called Water, Energy, Land Use Nexus for Climate Resilient Central Asia. So the idea is to look at all these interactions between these 4 sectors to make, the region water resilient. And we have already collected a number of examples within this project of case studies on climate resilient agribusiness companies in Central Asia. And let me give you 2 examples that I think answer these 2 points that were made already about innovation and also learning from more traditional societies. The first one is in Turkmenistan, a strawberry producer who has invested in innovative hydroponic greenhouses. And this has allowed him to reduce water use by 95%. So it's quite,
I think we're going to keep coming back to agriculture, aren't we?
And not only reduce water use, but also reduce land and water pollution by using almost 0 pesticide. So that's an example where you manage different elements together. Another example, in Kyrgyzstan, a food supply company who has provided purchase guarantees to farmers so that they produce lentils, leading to economic diversification of the local agriculture, but also lentil can be produced with very few water. So it's really adapted to a drought, area, to drought risks. And these lentils also, they have helped reduce the use of fossil fuel-based fertilizers. So here you have an example where you deal with mitigation and adaptation at the same time. So we need to work on 3 main dimensions: the governance of water, and the Dutch history also, I think, teaches that. You need to work on innovation, as you mentioned, and also learning from more traditional societies.
That's a good summary. Estelle, I cut you off in your prime during your presentation, but I want to pick up where Matilda started, and the rest of the panel will be talking about this as well. According to the Water Education Council, it takes about 3 gallons of water to grow 1 cup of lettuce, 7 gallons of water to make 1 slice of whole wheat bread, 46 gallons of water to make 1.36 ounces of butter, and 80 gallons of water to grow 1 ounce of almonds. And we always hear the avocado is the worst example of agriculture. How, Estelle, when you were in Morocco, or from your experience there, do you persuade farmers to be more creative in the use of water?
Well, we connect people from this village with organisms in agronomy, and they can there exists now cooperation in farming, and they can get some crops resilient, just like hemp, just like lentils, or just like other kind of plant species, and they have some kind of courses in agroforestry and in agroecology, so that they can reuse their organic waste, they can produce biocompost, and biocompost is rich in water, and they can spare water thanks to that. And I just wanted to show another slide, because the purpose of this session is thinking creatively about the problem of water scarcity, which means that we have to imagine new words and new practice. So you can use that, you can see that we have created a novel practice, cross-country skiing on sand, not on artificial snow, because we want to preserve the resource. And we want to show that that arid areas are sources of opportunities. This is adaptation. So we want to create some kind of ecotourism, agrotourism, and this kind of activities will preserve some villages, some places, and it will help to restore ecosystem and to preserve the resource.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
You happy you've made lovely. Thank you very much for that. I want to go to, I think, Kevin now, because we've identified some of the problems, but one of the solutions was hinted at earlier about cooperation. How can we cooperate regionally to save water, considering both flooding and the need for timely release to agriculture and industry? So it's a timing issue and it's a cooperation issue. How do you solve that one?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. In my daily job, we are challenged all the time with getting this huge amount of water for agricultural products. In Kazakhstan, a lot of it comes from rivers, a lot of surface water, not too much groundwater is pumped out. Just a little bit of history: when you pump out of a well and groundwater, you're actually putting it back in the ground, and if you have saturation, you're using it again in the future. But when you're not pumping it out of the ground and you have surface water, you're using it and then nobody else can use it. So there's the two main rivers that come in here from other countries through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. Those two rivers, we need to help with agriculture practices, saving water so that there'll be more water available when it comes to us. Also, infrastructure is going to be a very key player into making this happen, and it's going to take a lot of funding from governments to make dams, to do water benches, to create this type of infrastructure. So first of all, we have many high-tech young Kazakhs. I was at the opening ceremonies when we came to Almaty. We see that there is information technology age going on, which is great. I was born BC, before computers, so I'm a little slow. But as we develop this, we have to identify the problems that we have, identify how much we have to use for water, and then go to the government and make these plans. How are we going to do this? How are we going to use it?
Okay, let's go to Randy. Randall, we're worried about water scarcity. We're worried about overuse of water. I've got a figure here. The average total home water use for every American is about 50 gallons a day, which seems to be a lot of water. And that doesn't take into account washing the car, I suspect. But as a quantum leap to Israel, Israel has gone from a country of water scarcity to water surplus. They conserve, they reuse, they desalinate, and they've heavily invested in technology to make all of this work. Why isn't the rest of the world learning from what Israel is doing?
Thank you, Stephen. I don't know why this particular example is not, it could have to do with investment and just the commitment that Israel has made to solving that problem. But if I may, I would like to pivot from Morocco and tell a story about Algeria. We're staying in the Middle East, North Africa. In Algeria, like in many places in the Middle East, sheep and goats are very, very critical to agriculture. And because of water scarcity, that means that there's a scarcity of browsing and the need to feed these flocks, and a lot of that feed is imported. And with import costs going up for feedstocks and so forth, this was creating a severe need. And so Enactus students in Tunisia studied the problem and decided that they could use locally grown materials to create a nutritious goat feed. And so they managed to do this and then to create businesses based on that, and then expand that through the use of web apps so that farmers across Tunisia who might produce one of the particular feedstocks needed for this feed combination could sign up and supply this and get goat feed in return. So this is one example of innovation, and I just want to reply, I guess, to, Estelle made the point that sometimes we need to look back to the past, and that innovation is not necessarily the answer, but of course innovation can be practices, not necessarily technologies. And when we think creatively about practices, we're not necessarily creating a new technology, but we are bringing together people's experience. And then when you bring in the use of mobile apps and things like this, then you are really creating a new community around your problem that didn't exist before. So thank you for allowing me to just pivot from your question and from Morocco.
No, the answer was better than the question.
Okay.
So thank you for that. Estelle, do you want to come back? Don't put it yet.
Excuse me. Yes, I want to come back because I just want to share something about innovation and something about traditional knowledge, because within the next month, we will combine traditional irrigation in Morocco, in Hassi Labiad, with some kind of innovation. We have a solution to capture the relative humidity that you can find into the air thanks to solar energy. And this will be an autonomous solution.
Autonomous, yeah.
Autonomous solution. And each people anywhere in the world would have water from the air, from the sky. And we want to propose it. So the water from the retara, the traditional irrigation, will go to the crops and to the farming. And for the people, each family could have clean water from the sky, thanks to the sun. So this is an innovation that we want to share.
That's a great example, but can it be scaled up to large scale?
Yes. Yes, it can.
Okay, that's good to know.
Follow us.
Henk, I'm going to sort of put you on the spot now. The UN Secretary General was optimistic after the recent UN conference, the first one they'd held on water for 80 years. So they're finally coming around to thinking about water and its impact on climate change, and said the commitments made at that conference would propel humanity towards a water-secure future everybody needs, which is a wonderful soundbite, isn't it? But after that soundbite is forgotten, is there a single way of propelling people to a more water-secure future, do you think?
Well, yes, certainly. You are referring to the Water Action Agenda, and I must
Yeah.
say that one of my initiatives is on this Water Action Agenda. So I built a coalition on the promotion of the use of nature-based solutions in the water sector, together with the Asian Development Bank, Invest International from the Netherlands, and some other parties. So I will personally make sure that that will be a success. So that's one thing out of, I think, a few hundred items on the Water Action Agenda. And the idea, I think, is that there will be, this Water Action Agenda will be monitored in follow-up conferences, although I'm not sure about which conference, but that's a very managerial approach. I think what we should really do is listen to people like Estelle and get inspiration from very motivated people with inspiring stories, and use them to put ourselves into action and to make sure that we all contribute to this bright future of Mr. Gutierrez.
But do you think those ideas will transmit to senior politicians, the people who actually make the big decisions?
Now, the good thing about the Water Action Agenda is that it is bottom-up. What I always find if I go to big conferences, that everybody is talking top-down. So world leaders should do something, but world leaders cannot solve problems. They can create a context in which we can solve problems, but it is us who should do it. And that's the good thing about the Water Action Agenda. People were invited bottom-up to form coalitions, to set goals, to try and find funding, which they have been partly successful. So unlike many other conferences where there are big ambitious goals, but without any plan, here we have the plan, but we still have to formulate the overarching goal, I guess.
Well, it was realistic because according to the World Resource Institute, of the 719 water commitments that were made, probably only about a quarter are worth taking seriously. So it's a question of filtering those commitments.
But you have to think creatively, and I'm not sure whether the World Resource Institute looked at them with enough creativity.
Fair enough. I couldn't answer that. That's very good. Matilda, just a question to you. Do you detect a change of policy by Europe, a European climate policy turning towards agriculture and land use? Increasingly aware, I mean, of land use?
Maybe I won't talk about only the EU, but OECD members.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we are doing, reviews of environmental policies of our members, and we are looking at these issues together much more increasingly. And the water, not only thanks to this conference, but this conference is helping to put the water issue at the top. And also when we are discussing something that is quite important to scale up all these kind of solutions, you need a lot of financing. You need financing for the big infrastructure projects that were mentioned, the dams, etc. But you need financing for the small scale, small enterprises. And when we are talking financing, for the time being, we are focusing a lot on climate issues, but now we need to focus on climate, biodiversity, and water pollution issues. So I think, yes, the water issue and the land use issue is more and more on the table of discussions when we are discussing policies and when we are discussing financing.
Okay. Let's go to Kevin. There's always been speculation when you talk about water. It naturally leads to speculation about water wars. And there has been some fighting recently between Iran and the Taliban over access to water. And now we've seen this dam break in Ukraine, which some people have described as ecocide. And the point I'm making, or asking you to tell us about, is whether or not these kind of flashpoints we should take seriously around the world, I mean Sudan and the Nile for another example, or whether they're individually, can be individually contained, which goes back to the question, is there enough cooperation between countries to prevent water wars spilling over?
Thank you for the question. Presently, everybody is very nervous about their water and letting it go to other countries. So Valmont, we have projects along the Nile. We just have shipped the largest project that has ever done in the irrigation world. It's over 3,000 machines. Each one of these machines is using more than 4 million liters a day. So you can understand the impact of this globally. Everybody that's involved in like the Nile, the Nile comes from Sudan and it feeds down into Egypt. And right now there's a big push for everybody to get to their chunk of the water. It's peaceful at this point, but it could lead, it's already tensionous in spots. In Kazakhstan, I know we have 2 rivers coming in, I think one going out, and Kazakhstan has put a dam there to help control their water and keep some, so you know, that puts tension on the neighbors. And I'm sure there's reciprocity that needs to be done between them. So right now, it's good. I think it's going to take a lot of the leaders, the head of states, excuse me, to help mitigate this and work with each other. We need to identify how much water we need to use, and Kazakhstan being a very huge country, will need to be able to go out and say, hey, we can use this water, we can produce crops, we can trade with you, and it's going to be a bilateral process. So,
but all of that means people have to start taking water seriously.
They have to. It's to the point now. Kazakhstan has only got a third of the production they had in the Soviet era. They want to go back to what they had. This is the Minister of Ag's vision to go forward with back, 3 times what they are now. So it's going to take water to do this. It's going to take water-saving devices. You talked about Israel's technologies a little bit ago. Israel has a lot of technologies. They control the water and they feed the plant at the exact right time. And so they don't waste any water in between when the plant needs it.
They don't just not waste it, they reuse it.
Yeah, and so it's a very tight cycle. Our company, Valmont, has Israel Technologies involved now, and we are using all kinds of different AI technologies to identify the plant health, the plant, the bugs, the herbicides that needs to be used, and then we can go in, spot do these, control the water with different rates among the field, because the fields have different uses. We're involved in this technology every day. And so it's going to take a lot of work to get to this. There is a lot of tension, though, and we should take it very seriously.
Well, Sudan borders 5 countries: Libya, Chad, the Central African Republic, Eritrea, South Sudan. I mean, the potential there is, well, very dangerous. Did you want to come in on this?
Oh, I was just thinking about the contrast that we have between, very high-tech solutions and low-tech, which I think we've been speaking about both. And I think, Kevin, some of the precision control that we can have requires, I think, generally a pretty high level of technology. whereas at the same time, I know we had a student project that was involved in finding ways to reuse rice, reuse water in rice cultivation. And I don't know the details of that, but I'm imagining that that was a very low-tech kind of approach. I just wonder if you have a comment.
For the rice production, I'm not a real expert on it, but it is more of reusing the water and recapturing it, because rice has got to be very, very wet. There's also technology coming on where they put different types of emulsifiers and different thing in the water so that it doesn't soak into the soil, and then they catch the water and run it back through the cycle. So lots of technologies.
Yeah, exactly, which is what we need. Can I go to Henk, because we're now sort of I'm talking internationally and cooperation or lack of it. Many governments, I haven't seen any governments do this, they don't want to commit to international binding agreements, do they, that they would have to abide by when it comes to water. How do you persuade them otherwise? And don't forget your microphone.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but governments are willing to commit to binding agreements, or more or less binding agreements, because almost every country in the world has now ratified the Paris Treaty on climate mitigation. Although it is not strictly binding, they have bound themselves to a kind of monitoring and measuring system, and maybe that's even more powerful than a management or formal obligation, because now they have subjected themselves to the scrutiny of their population. And you see in many countries, you see activists pushing their government to do more. In our country, it's become difficult to enter the city of The Hague on a Saturday afternoon because the major road is being blocked by Extinction Rebellion every week. So that will create at some point a tipping point. So maybe it's not necessary that we persuade our governments to sign internationally binding agreements, but just as the Paris Agreement, that we create the conditions for pressures to build up to force them to do the right thing. Because I think most of our governments, they don't lead by example, but they lead by being pressured by the population.
That's true. All politicians are like that. Kevin, it is true, though, isn't it? As droughts intensify, so the politics of water will emerge. Old laws will have to be rewritten, won't they? And they'll talk to the consultants about, no doubt, rewriting them. Behaviours will have to change.
I think we're going to find in the future that the old policies, like in Kazakhstan, flood irrigating, this type of thing, it isn't even viable. And the way to the future is going to be only with water-saving devices, water-saving equipment. And I truly believe that the tension will come from the general population, and there's a division because of industry and ag using so much water, and the general population not having water at certain places, that it will create tension. And to mitigate this is going to be, the politicians' field for the future.
Yeah, so again, it's bringing the pressure on the politicians coming up and telling them they've got to think water. Estelle, let's go back to Morocco, because we talked about Israel and water use and how they've gone from famine to feast. Morocco sells a lot of vegetables in Europe. Often on the back of packaging I see grown in Morocco. Are they copying the Israelis, or are they reusing water? I'm not talking about the small scale, I'm talking about as a country as a whole. What did you learn when you were there?
I don't know if they have a policy of reusing their water, but there are big reflections. They're thinking about their crops. There are a lot of studies about how to spare water, but reuse water. I could tell you much more. But I would ask a question, because we are talking about policies and governance of water. But what about people? How can you gain support of people to motivate, and how to motivate them to change?
Well, I think how you motivate people is when they turn the tap on and no water comes out.
Yes.
That's pretty good motivation.
Yes, but we can speak about the best idea, we can speak about the best solution, the best theory, but what about the people? How to gain support? How to motivate them? How to talk to each community? I don't have the solution. We use sports because sports is a media and it's a universal language. And with sports, you can take many people from any social classes, from all generations, from any ethnical group. So it's a way to motivate, but we have to think about how to gain support from people. And what about education? What about environmental education? We have to educate people.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, this is what, in Actis,
Yes.
this is what they're doing. Perhaps there hasn't been enough education about water use or reuse. I mean, if anybody else wants to suggest how that could be done, Kevin?
I would like to say that the first thing we do in our company when we come into an area is we try to identify what's going on with the water, how it needs to be distributed, and then we try to train our dealers, our support teams, how to go out and work with this. And it's very critical because there's an infinite number of solutions for water management. And you have to try to pick the best one to fit the situation, and you have to pick the type of solution that you need that you can build on in the future if you want to use your technologies or stuff with it.
Yeah. Matilda, we've talked most of this session about water scarcity, but there are places where there is too much water. I'm talking about rising sea levels. Do you see that prospect being identified quickly or people taking action? Estelle says it has to come from people. I'm thinking about the coast of China, which is where many of you have experience of. The Chinese government pushed very hard for development, Shanghai, Hubei, all the way down that coast. But now they're under serious threat of flooding because of rising sea levels. So what's the answer to that one?
Well, I mean, these are, what these famous tipping points where I think that this rising sea level is really under scrutiny. And all the states, they know which part of their lands are threatened by that, and actions is taken, but it's kind of more adaptation more than mitigation. And there are a lot of economic consequences, human consequences, etc. But there is one thing I would like to say about, especially your example about this small-scale solution, like using the sun to capture the water in the atmosphere. I think, from what I understood, and I'm not a water specialist, that now, what is much more obvious is that you don't only have this water that you see, but you have the water in the atmosphere. And the problem, I'm not sure that your solution is scalable, because if you capture all the water somewhere, this is water that would have gone with the winds somewhere else for agriculture. So if you really scale it up, you might produce problems elsewhere. And that's the new thinking about water. It's like you not only have water in the ocean, in the rivers and whatever, but you have water in the atmosphere. And if you change your agriculture somewhere, you change the atmosphere, the water that is included in this atmosphere that could go somewhere to for the agriculture of another country. So we are all dependent also through that type of water. So solutions that might look super cool locally might not work if you scale them up. You create another problem elsewhere.
I don't know if the solution is super cool, but we have to test it. And first of all, we have to take action on the field. Theory is great, but theory needs action and to be experimented. And our solution will capture the water on the air into the desert. So no agriculture, no farming, no crops in the middle of Sahara. Almost there are humidity in Sahara. So if you have a small village with inhabitants without any source of water, they can capture the water of the air, and it could help. And if you can collect data about the evolution of this humidity, probably you can anticipate and you can prevent from some disease because due to sand tempest. Probably you can correlate humidity with the arrival of a sand tempest. And we can elaborate some kind of a prediction. Anyway, this solution is probably not the only solution, but it's one among others. So we have to cooperate.
That was a message from the beginning of the forum, cooperation, and the president, and he's absolutely right. Just let's end up with your thoughts going along the panel, starting with Randall. It's difficult to assign a price for water, isn't it? Although water companies in Britain do that and don't do any work to get it either. But they're making fortunes without treating water properly. But current economic systems could try harder, because if countries don't, it will inevitably lead to unsustainable use. There's no doubt about that. And that kind of mismanagement of a finite resource is bound to push the global water cycle out of balance. So, going along the panel to finish this session, how do you teach the world to treat the loss of fresh drinking water as more seriously? Starting with you.
Sure, I'll just start with the idea of integrated water management, which I think has been cited before. And that's bringing people together to look at all phases of the problem, and from that, within that, pricing has to be a big part of the solution, getting the price right. And also, as we were saying, there are high-tech solutions, there are low-tech solutions. All solutions are needed, and innovation tied with entrepreneurship is one way to bring solutions to beneficiaries, beginning at a local scale and then hopefully moving upscale.
Kevin.
I believe that identifying what our needs for water is going to be a big part of it. To get where we need to be in the end, we need to challenge people to come up with better solutions, better river management, better water management, especially the surface water. The surface water can, once it goes to the sea, it's done for us. And the well water that we're taking out of wells, we need to think about the recycle, the filtration, and what we put with this water when it goes back down into the ground, because we've seen in like Nebraska, we've seen contamination with fertilizers and high fertilizer pesticide rates of contamination in the well water. And after 20 years now of regulation, we're getting back to where it's clean, because the water is in a cycle. So we need to be able to identify and then have some type of action plan to move forward.
Okay, that's good. Hank?
Well, there is already a commission working on the valuation of water with Mrs. Matsukato, who is a very famous publicist and ex-commissioner of the European Union, is on that commission, and I believe Mr. Rugstrom, who is heading the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, he is also on that commission. And it's good to put a value on water, a monetary value, if you like, but it's not enough. So, first of all, this monetary value should not be cost price plus, what the water companies in the UK are doing, but it should be about real value. What is the value of water in society? Water is more than a commodity. Water is the source of life, and water is in everything. All the SDGs are related to water, more or less. And therefore, we need to inform and inspire the general public. And that cannot be done by assigning a monetary value alone. People need to be aware of the intrinsic value of water. And people like me, engineers, well, I cannot do that. We need the power of storytelling, of communication, of inspiration. So that is what we need to work on.
Okay, thank you. Matilda?
That's a tough question. I think, yes, we need price on water, but what kind of prices? And we have experience in France in some cities where you have, for each person, a certain amount of water that is will be low price, and then the more you go up, the price will go up, so that you balance a little bit the excess consumption of water. For example, people using water for their own swimming pools, it would be much more expensive. So, but this is not enough, because you could, how to integrate also water that is in the clothes you wear, in the food you eat, it's much more complicated. So you need also, maybe in this case, disclosure system, so that people realize that when they eat meat instead of cheese or instead of lentils, it's quite different in terms of water consumption. Or if they change clothes or buy clothes every day, they will consume water, and that's where people are not conscious. So you need definitely prices, different type of pricing for different type of users of water, and disclosure, and of course, training, education.
That's most sensible. Thank you. Estelle, finally, briefly.
Briefly, and I agree with that notion of price of water. According to this population in this small village in Morocco, the more you work for the maintenance of the Retara, the more you have water. So water is money for them, for these people, because water is precious.
Precious indeed. As Henk so wonderfully said, water is more than a commodity, water is life. And that's why water is important, and today has been important, because up to 3.5 billion people live under conditions of water stress at least once a month. Think about that figure next time you leave the tap running when you're cleaning your teeth or shaving. And as the earth warms, the severity of drought will intensify. Water insecurity is, without doubt, one of the most pressing sustainability challenges of the 21st century. I want to thank Randall, Kevin, Henk, Matilda, and Estelle for being such a brilliant panel. Thank you.
Can I make
Stefan,
can I make one small remark to the audience? Because we are all water enthusiasts here, and I would like to point out to you a wonderful publication that our National Spatial Planning Agency prepared in the run-up to the New York Water Conference. It's called The Geography of Future Water Challenges, and you can download the PDF of this publication for free at their website. So it is at pbl.nl. If you Google the Geography of Future Water Challenges, you will also come by it. And if you want to see it, I have it with me. So feel free to approach me. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Henk, very much.